Hi, I'm Dan Snow. I'm the President of the Council for British Archaeology. And what we do is we try and support communities as they investigate their archaeology in order to learn more about their heritage. Now, for some years, I've been fascinated by what's going on here at the field of the Battle of Fulford. Fulford is one of the forgotten battles of that great year 1066, hugely important. The first of 3 battles, was followed by Stamford Bridge and Hastings, of course. What happened here had a decisive impact on the events of that infamous year.
The Battle of Fulford is pure Hollywood. The brother of the King of England is leading the Vikings.
And they laughed, no, that's not horseshoes. We don't have horseshoes like that. And I said, well, we do.
One of those layers appears to have trapped interesting material from 1066.
It's absolutely fantastic chance to uncover a battlefield, which in my mind, it definitely is the battlefield.
'16 is the 950th anniversary of the Battle of Fulford and indeed the Battle of Hastings. This is a seminal year in English history. We've been looking for this battlefield for 15 years. We are 99% certain that we found it because the literature and the landscape all point to this location.
Welcome to the landscape of Fulford, just south of York on the A19. And running down behind me also and joining the River Ouse is a small river, a small beck called Germany Beck. So what are we going to do? How are we going to try and understand this landscape? Well, a lot of work's already been done, but this year, July 2015, we're going to open up trenches to try and investigate further the area right next to Germany Beck.
The dig this year is the 3rd dig that we've done in this area. Each one has been slightly bigger. First we started out with just a trial pit. We found lots of bits of broken weapon in that. So we dug a bigger pit the following year and we found lots of recycling bits of metal in that pit. So we've done a very much bigger pit this year to try and find more of both of these.
It's really, really important for the archaeology to actually understand a bit about the geology that's going on here. I mean, we're right next to Germany Beck now. Obviously, that's Germany Beck of today. But there are a number of features to the beck here, geological features that the beck runs through, that might actually make this a very useful place to try and understand the battlefield from. The really important things that help to form the landscape that we see and the landscape in which the Battle of 1066 took place here are all formed by the action of glaciers. In this area you've had a big glacier coming down what's the Vale of York today, pushing in front of it, right, mounds of stuff, and it reaches a point at Escrick, just a few miles south of us. It reaches that point and it goes no further. And then it starts to recede again as it melts, as the climate changes. But then it starts to come back down south again and piles up a new moraine across where York is, on the way towards Tadcaster. So you've got 2 moraines running east-west across the Vale of York. And where we are here, we're sat right in the middle of those 2 moraines on a funny little moraine running north-south. And at one time there was a great pile of water just after the glaciers have gone. There's a big lake that forms at the top of what's now Germany Beck. Eventually that lake fills up and the water's got to go somewhere, and so it spills over the moraine down into the River Ouse. So 2 things: a very long story, the geology, the way that the landscape's developed here over thousands of years, and then seeing whether or not we can identify within that long story a specific point. That's the trick, that's the tricky bit. We'll also open a couple of trenches to try and understand an area a little bit further up the beck. And there we're going to try and investigate the relationship between the beck and the peaty deposits that are found further up.
What we have here, an interesting feature, we have a layer of peat down here which is going down towards the beck which is over there, and we've put in 2 trenches, one here and one a bit higher up, to identify where the peat starts.
In this test pit we can see a number of different things. I mean, the most obvious thing straight away that everyone spots really is that there's a land drain in there. That's probably Victorian. There are 3 important layers in here so far that we've uncovered. The top layer is about 30 centimetres of soil, but it's got a lot of clay in it.
This is where you put the flags in?
Exactly, yeah.
Layers, is it?
Yeah, so we put flags in to try and define the layers. You then hit a grey clay, but this grey is really interesting because the grey is kind of as alluvium. So this really is the sort of stuff that's getting left behind
From
by
the river,
exactly
the flooding or whatever.
It's flooding.
Yeah.
Below that alluvium, we get into a really dark layer, and what we've got there is peat. So what's happened is you've got a fairly long period of stable, marshy, boggy conditions, followed by a period of flooding, basically. So it's got flooded for a while, and then eventually you have a build-up of soil over the top of that. So actually, somewhere we're on the boundary between the peat bog and the flooding, and the bit up there that wasn't getting flooded and never formed a peat bog.
I've been using auger to try and find out where the 2 layers meet, and the first hole was there, which is just below the surface. We have the peat and the gravel, the clay and the gravel just below the surface. This one here, about 3 metres away, full depth of the auger is just pure soil and peat. Halfway between the 2 is this layer here where we have the clay, and then the peat and the soil is starting around this layer, so halfway. So we can say this is the line where the 2 start to merge, and the peat layer builds up from that layer down towards the river.
We're just into it there.
Yeah.
And we dug through it, and then a nice sandy layer, and
Yeah.
then at the bottom, again, stones.
Yeah.
But the ones I've just picked up in the last few minutes have been smaller pebbles than the big ones there.
Yeah. So we're really starting
So it's
to...
layers and layers.
Yeah. And funny enough, as archaeologists, we're starting to be much more geoarchaeologists here. The horizon of human activity here really does appear to be the top 20 centimetres. Just that brown soil, everything, all the action of the world since about 12,000 BC. Below that you can see it goes much more orange. And within that orange layer, towards the bottom of it, there's a separate layer that is got a lot of cobbles in it. And then you can see where we've extended the trench downwards a bit. Just below the cobbles you get a change and you get much more pure sand.
And below that it looks like clay again, but we think at the bottom we're going to find some charcoal.
There are layers that are predominantly cobble,
Right.
and that layer that's predominantly cobble is the thing that's left a good crossing point across the river. So there we have it, a classic glacial cobble, a feature of large areas of the Vale of York, sometimes forming layers that can be useful to us, sometimes forming layers that can confuse archaeologists. So in this area behind us, which we've got covered over at the moment, we've got the cobblestones. So we've got an area of cobblestones under here, and we're just trying to extend our excavation of that to really understand whether or not we can see any evidence for humans either using the cobblestones as a causeway, as a ford, or whether we can actually see any evidence that the cobblestones have been rearranged somewhat to make an even better ford. So it's a really interesting spot. Well, here we are at trench number 2. We're still down in the valley of Germany Beck. It's very much worthwhile remembering that Germany Beck's valley at this point was a lot wider in the past than it is today. There's a big bank just behind me that's 3 metres tall, and that material was all brought in the 1960s by people building the university, all the waste material from the university being built. So it's a much wider area for the beck to flow in. And what we're trying to do here is we're investigating the area that's downstream from the cobble causeway that we were looking at. If you look behind me at the moment, you can see a big, thick but tapering area of clay, and that clay is in fact the very bottom end of the 1960s dumping. So that's had all sorts of things like bicycle wheels and things like that. But then just below it, you can see a layer of what we call alluvium. There's a lighter grey material, not much in there, and that seems to represent flooding in the sort of 1900s. So at the moment, we're just really about to embark on a journey back in time through the soils here, working our way back to see what we might have got in years gone by, because the alluvium will have built up here.
The moment one starts the briefing, everybody starts to arrive.
So I'd like now, if somebody wants something slightly lighter to do, is to get one of the trays that we've completed, get them washed, let's have a look at them, let's decide what they are. Anyway, and the other thing is, we've got, there's all the coffee and water. Yes, everything is to be found. Everything is to be found around there. There's tons of water. Please keep yourself well watered. This is drinking water, but I put it here, for the wash down. In terms of the team workout, I'll very much leave that to John to do. But we know that Bob is going to be leading on the thing down there. And our metal detectors. If there's anything you've got nice and clear and you feel you just want somebody to come and do it, John Leary is your man there, and he will step in and give him a chance to get in there, because there's no point having a metal detectorist if you don't let them get in and have a look around.
Yeah. I'm a member of the York Metal Detecting Club, and we've been asked along to this dig to assist in finding any metal items.
Almost definitely iron. This is very interesting. Again, it's around that area somewhere. I need to check the soil really.
You can see the white flags over there behind Bob. They indicate where there may be some items found. It may well be that it's a mineralised chunk of earth or something like that, but I think it's probable that there is something in those layers.
Reenactment of the way that people lived their lives in the past has actually been a really popular aspect of archaeology over many, many years. Very often it's undertaken by volunteers, but these are people who actually spend a lot of time reading and learning about minutiae of life in a particular period.
This is a Viking A-frame tent. This would have been the sail off the boat, and what they do when they land, they use the sail to make a shelter. So even though we're using planks, they would have used whatever they could, branches and that, just to make the actual frame. Most of what you call weapons are actually tools that were used around the farm. So most weapons would have been a general tool. So you've got your axe. Axe, yes, is for killing somebody, but of course an axe is for chopping wood or carving or anything. A spear, yes, you can kill someone with a spear, you can stab them with a spear, but of course the spear was for hunting. So if people were told, right, we're off to war, we're off to battle, they would have a spear, they would have an axe. So that's why they all fought with spears and axes. You then had the Dane axe, and this became well known in 1066. And then the only weapon that actually is a killing weapon, of course, is the sword. The sword is developed for nothing but a killing weapon. And a Viking sword is not a stabbing weapon, it's a cleaver. That's why it's got such a broad blade. It's for hacking. But not many people had these, only professional warriors, because the sword is equivalent today of having a Ferrari, because metal was so expensive in them days. This is why we're saying that the chance of finding a sword here today, quite, you might do, but they would have been picked up and reused.
Because we did an excavation last year in 2014, we need to use the evidence from that excavation to lead us in how we go about excavating this year. So Chaz is just having a chat with Bob at the moment, using the photos from last year to try and give him an idea of what to expect to find as they go down looking for the causeway in Trench 1.
The instructions to the diggers there, just to go down, because I wanted to see, first of all I wanted to record the base, the base of the stones there, and then I wanted the clay layer underneath revealed. So you will see that there are some holes that they've dug down, so that we can get the staff down into it. But they've actually only taken it back to the stone, the loosish stone layer, and they stopped when they got to the very hard layer. But what is that at the very top, though?
It's always interesting trying to find evidence of something which only happened one day, which is basically a Battle of Fulford. So it's a kind of totally different kind of a dig to looking at habitation. You're just really trying to find what the landscape was like so you can explain the battle a bit. And what we're doing here is we're slowly going through various levels of soil, looking for any dating evidence in them, like pottery or finds, any other kind of finds. It's so dry, isn't it? It is. Really nice and good, nice and crumbly. You can spot finds. And then as we get very close to this bottom layer, we know there's a nice stone causeway. And when we get very close to it, we'll be very carefully scraping off the soil to uncover the causeway, because we want to find out how the causeway is made up. That there's indications it's big stones, maybe with a fine stone gravel layer on top, with maybe edging stones. And then what we'll do is we'll take a section of the causeway and go down through it, trying to find dating evidence so we can say what age the causeway is.
We've had people from locally, and we've had some people coming from a little further afield to lend their expertise. And that has put together a really, really strong team of people with no experience at all, through to people who are very experienced, some of whom have some professional experience. So it's a really great combination of people, different ages, young and older folk, and some people who've retired. It's a real great mix of people who've all come together to make this a really important project, and it's been a great community dig, and well done to everyone who's been involved.
I'm working with a lot of really brilliant people, really friendly, and I'm learning so much. It's a chance in a lifetime. I love it.
Well, thoroughly enjoyed it. I've been coming for the last 2 years. I've met people I would never have met before, and yet we've all got this common interest, and you go the next year, and it's just lovely. And everybody's so friendly and just so diverse.
When I came, I didn't know whether I'd be allowed to do anything, but it's really, after a quick talk, it's really pitching. So it's a really good balance of, friendly support and guidance, and being allowed to do things, real archaeology.
I live in the local area. I was actually born and brought up here in Fulford, and I came along the other day, a couple of weeks ago, when Chaz first started the dig here, and just out of nosiness introduced myself and asked what was going on, and I've been popping along near enough every day since and getting involved in the dig itself. You come along the Selby Road coming into York and heading out of York, and both Fulford signs have the Battle of Fulford 1066 sign on them, which have been there a few years now, so it obviously has been known for a while. Now we're hopefully going to start proving things as the dig goes on. It would be great to have maybe a local building or whatever dedicated to the Battle of Fulford, where visitors from far afield, Scandinavia, whatever, could come and visit us, and this is something where Chaz and I may well be looking at.
The Battle of Fulford is pure Hollywood. Here you have the brother of the King of England. The brother of the King of England is leading the Vikings into this battle, fighting against the English. He was the Earl here in 1065 until they rebelled against him. So this is a very personal battle as far as he's concerned. The people he's fighting against are the two earls who have a very interesting background because they were actually brought up by their granny, and we know her as Lady Godiva. So Granny Godiva was alive at the time of the battle, living over in Chester or Preston. We're not actually sure which.
So what really happens in 1066? In the south of England we've got Harold Godwinson, King of England. He's under threat from William of Normandy, who has a claim on his throne.
Advancing from the south, you had a Viking army, a combination of a rebel English earl, who was actually a brother of King Harold, Tostig, and his ally, the erstwhile King of Norway, one of the greatest warriors of the medieval period, Harold Hardrada. Together, they overwhelmed the northern English army here, which meant they captured York and forced the King of England, Harold, to march up from the south, where he'd been watching the coast because he was worried about being invaded by Duke William of Normandy. That led to the Battle of Stamford Bridge, which in turn affected the outcome of the Battle of Hastings.
We've just come across this piece of ceramic. We don't know its age, but it could be as old as medieval. It was towards the bottom of the sand layer we're getting to, which is just above the cause we're investigating to show how man-made it is. It should be very dateable by an expert. So yesterday we were digging this extension, went through the sand and iron pan layers and came across stones coming like this. And so today we decided to remove the overburden and the tarpaulin from the original trench 1, and you can see that actually the line of stones is probably continuing the same diagonal area like this. And we're just starting to really decide how to tackle deciding whether this is natural moraine or built up causeway. We may take a section out to see if there's any dating evidence underneath. But you can see that these stones are actually sat on a very hard, thick layer of pretty tough silt.
Things have moved on since the last time we had a look here. Trench 2 is where we're in the region where we found really interesting material down underneath a layer of stone, in amongst a layer of stone, that has suggested might actually be weaponry. We've had it looked at, and it does appear to be fragments of sword. And we're actually digging through a number of layers that have been laid down by flooding. So we've got lots of layers of alluvium that then sit on top of a layer of iron panning. Iron pan is the result of a natural process of iron seeping down through the layers of the ground. Then the iron will actually start to form little layers of what is rusty coloured soil, and this builds up into little tiny plaques almost of iron material. So iron pan forms a crusty layer. It's a bit of a scourge for farmers sometimes. It's very hard, you can hear people hacking their way through it, and that iron pan layer has formed at the bottom of the alluvium. So something's happened. There's been a change in the way that the river and the flooding and the tides have deposited stuff here, and they've laid stuff down on top of the stones, trapping it. Okay, well, it looks like we've kind of reached glacial deposits here rather than river deposits now. Most of what we've been going through here are deposits laid down by flooding and the tides pushing their way up into the little creek that Germany Beck flows down. And so we've gone through alluvium, we've got panning, iron panning there, we've got a layer of sand, and then underneath that we've got a really firm brown clay with pebbles wedged into it, which is what we call boulder clay. It's the prime deposit laid down by the glaciers. We're not going to find any more human habitation underneath this material. So we've reached the bottom in this corner of the trench. That's slightly disappointing actually, because in the past, last year, there was a layer here which contained metalwork. But that trench wasn't far away, it's only next door to us. So what we need to do now is try and understand the difference between where I am at the moment in the trench and the trench on the other side there.
This is the edge of last year's trench here, so.
Yes.
So that has only been dug out now, but this is the infill from last year. What we didn't do last year was go beneath the iron pad, the iron layer, where Chaz, in his test trench just here, found stones with bits of metal stuck to them. So that's what we want. So if you can, there may be something in here that's.
So it's stuff that's been thrown away last year. So there could be all sorts of bits in there.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
We'll just break that out then, and
it's really what's at
go
the
down.
bottom that we. So we'll be hoping.
Yes.
Fines washing is actually a really important part of an archaeological process. Sometimes it's seen a bit of the sort of the handmaiden to digging, but actually it's really important. What we're trying to do is make sure that you can see the find properly, so that first of all we know it is a find and not just a little bit of stone, but also so it's ready to be looked at by specialists.
The more you learn, the more interested you become, so I'll definitely be back.
Very enjoyable. Hard work, but very enjoyable, very rewarding.
But I think in a way it's not so much what comes out of it, it's been a process, and it's more what we've been finding as we go along and the enjoyment and quality of the experience.
Here we are at Trench 1. It's not very far from Trench number 2. But actually it's very, very different. We've got a layer of glacial cobbles that run across the valley of the Germany Beck, and in different places it's been very possible that these have been able to be used as a fording point. In fact, we think that we can show in amongst the cobbles that there's been a causeway, at least in this spot, that's been used for people getting across the river. It's very exciting for us if we were able to imagine that that causeway was here in 1066 at the time of the Battle of Fulford. But so far we don't have hard and fast evidence for that. It's very difficult to find what happened on a single day. But what we have been able to do is we've been able to show that there is a good crossing point here and that it's been used during some point in the medieval period. We don't know exactly when. That's why we're here now working on to try and find some dating evidence. But behind us you can see that people are working away on cleaning up the cobbles. So we're heading towards a point where we can draw and photograph this material before we then put a section through it. So typical archaeology, we spend ages cleaning it up and making it look beautiful, and then we're going to go through it. When we go through it, that's one of those opportunities we're going to have for finding any trapped material in amongst the cobbles that might give us a bit of a date for when this area was in use.
I think there's definitely community spirit here, and I think it's really encouraging, and I think anybody who comes here is made to feel really, really welcome.
I would say to people, just get involved. There's not many digs that I know of like this where people can just turn up and straight away you're into the action. You just can't beat it.
With us on the team is Mary Wickerts, who's with us all the way from Sweden, from the Gothenburg City Museum. Mary's here because she's a specialist in Viking materials and Viking archaeology.
In 2004 I walked with Chas and was allowed to go back to the parish hall back here, and that's where I met John, the archaeologist that's here too at the site, and they showed me a lot of debris. And I thought, my God, what fabulous material you have. And they went, no, we don't. And I said, well, this is slag. And there was a big, huge thing that looked like a flat bun made totally out of the remains of iron and slag from what you would use in a melting process when you reuse iron. They also had a lot of horseshoes. And the horseshoes, some of them were very small, and they laughed, no, that's not horseshoes. We don't have horseshoes like that. And I said, well, we do. And if Fulford is a Scandinavian troop advancement led by a Norwegian king, then we also have packing horses. And the packing horses back then would be as small as the Shetland pony is today. And that would be a Gotlandsruss, is what we call it. So in hence of that, the shoe sizes on the iron shoes for the horses fitted perfectly. And to top it off, back then we had a lot of research going on in Sweden, so we knew that the horseshoes we saw were Viking Age. And that's why I'm part of it here. I am representing the other perspective.
Right, so what we're doing here then is we're clearing out this trench to the left-hand side. We're going to remove all the top cobbles on this end first, see how far down they go, and gradually work our way right back, removing all of the road to see how deep it is, see what's underneath that, and then we'll get a profile. If we leave that edge on the right-hand side there, we can leave that edge and profile that as well.
This is trench 1. It's been fully excavated, and my job is to record what we found. Drawing it onto a drawing board, we obviously can't do it full scale, so I'm drawing it to a reduced scale, which is 1 to 20. I have a planning frame, which is 1 metre by 1 metre, and it's divided into 25 smaller squares. So by placing it on the ground, looking at what is in the first small square, I can transfer that onto the drawing board. What I'm doing in drawing this is I would ignore all the clay, all the soil. I would only draw the stones, and therefore you've got a clear, definite picture of what's down there. In other words, we're drawing what we're interested in and leaving out what we're not interested in. Or as I joke myself, anything to get out of digging, you know. So.
It's been very interesting, but it has been very hard work. I can say physically hard work, but we had success today where we found an unusual line of colour, which means that it could show the difference between the natural and then man-made on top, so that's been quite exciting.
Plenty of that. Can I have a new slave, please? This one's grunting.
It's just making horrible noises. I'm sure we have the silent slave. It's next to 2,000 sesterces. Do you remember what context did this little bit of bone come out of? Was it the Iron Pan 2005?
It was.
This bone's really interesting, isn't it? Because it's turning up in a number of places now, but they've been preserved, presumably either by the contact with the iron pan, or in fact being preserved because they've been burned at some point. And then you can just see on the other side there, you can make out where the marrow is. We'll have to get someone to have a look at these pieces of bone. The more of them we get, then the more interesting they're becoming. Brilliant, thank you, Simon. So this little fragment of bone has come from a layer that's got lots and lots of iron pan in it. We give them a number, so we finish up with a numbering system locating each context by number, so that means we can relate the records that I keep with the finds that we've got here. The photographs we take are all related together, and 2005 is the layer where most of these little bits of bone are coming from. Those numbers are not dates. We're not writing down the potential date of a layer. What we're doing is giving numbers to layers, and that helps us to tie all our records together. So once we've given a number to a particular layer of soil, then that number goes through the whole system. That number finds its way onto cards that go with the finds, that sit in trays until they've been washed. Then they go into bags, the number's written on the bag, the number's written into ledgers, so we're listing exactly what we've found and where and which layer it came from, linked together by the number. We have a context card that tells us all about our observations of that layer. Also, if we take photographs, we make sure that the context number is in the photograph. So these numbers are a vital part of our recording process. In fact, you could say that they're the thread that ties the entire excavations together. Here in trench number 1, We've been working our way down onto and then investigating a layer of cobbles. It's still very difficult, as a lot of the things are on this site, to put a precise date to it. What we do know is that at some time in a later date, a bridge is put in, and once the bridge goes in, presumably this routeway using a ford goes out of use. So whether or not underneath it you've got some natural cobbles, it's not really clear, but what's going on the top, we're now sure of that we've got people creating a roadway here, and that road is along the alignment that you would expect people to be moving on that north-south routeway coming in towards York directly from the south. And it's very interesting trying to work out where the crossing points are, and we've added to that, we've added to the evidence for this area now by suggesting that we've got a roadway coming down here, and that may well be the fording point that's talked about during the battle in 1066.
Peter, I'm going to move your bike a little bit because we're doing a bit more digging, so I'm going to make another spoil heap, and I just want to run the wheelbarrow around.
So back up at the Peat Trench, we've got some developments. Martin's got a theory. He's tested out all sorts of different options to try and eliminate possibilities. And what we're left with is a theory about not so much the peat, but about the edge of the valley of the Germany Beck.
I was called on site because I do battlefields. We've excavated an area, a small, very low trench, to uncover the clay. Now we've looked at the divots in the clay itself, and you find out that these divots are not natural. And then we've had to explain what could they be. We think it's actually footprints when they were fighting.
My inexperience, I would have dug that up, but Martin has guided us in the right way, saying that that was where the footsteps leading down to the riverbank would have been, and that this was the edge of the river originally, so that is the muddy bank coming down.
You imagine them pushing and shoving it, as in a rugby field. They're on their toes here, pushing against each other. This could have been the forming of these divots, because normally clay is sedimentary and it's flat.
I'm not saying these are footprints. I'm saying they have the right relationship. Well, it was found in the peat layer. This was found in the peat layer?
No, it's on the spoil, wasn't it?
It's on the spoil over there, wasn't it? So perhaps
the etching and thing is very consistent with it being in peat.
We also now are looking into the peat itself. Peat is well known as a well-preserved preservative because of its pH level is high and the oxygen level is low. So anything organic will be there in the peat.
Definitely been worked. Yeah. Definitely been worked, hasn't it?
Definitely.
Lovely colours.
Well, I've been sifting through lots of lovely mud and peat and just looking for something, and the tiniest of finds you get really quite excited about, and they're not always quite what you think they're going to be. But it's just the experience of just sifting through. It's just different from the big digging.
These are little circles around the outside.
Yeah, like.
Sharp detector.
Oh, it does look like it's been worked.
Yes. Well, we thought it was a coin, but it's the front of a stud, I think, off the jeans ones. Yeah. So not a proper button, but the front plate of a stud.
Dirty. It looked very pleasant.
Yeah, it looked. When I first saw it, I thought it looked like
Oh, Chas, could I? Oh, you have a picture of it underneath it with all the steps. Excellent.
So here we are on the last day. We're drawing things to a close now. It never seems like it's ever going to happen somehow. You always seem to be driving on forward, thinking of what's the next thing we've got to discover, and then suddenly you find yourself on the last day. It's almost typical of a community excavation where lots of different people have been working on different parts of the project, and you're winding down on the side of digging holes anymore because you've got to make sure that you're getting everything recorded. What have we got from the last 2 weeks? Well, we've got 3 areas that we've been looking at that we can talk a bit about. The first one of those is further up up Germany Beck, where we have the peat deposits. So we have deposits of peat, which are really interesting. They're mentioned in the sagas, so we'd really like to try and get some dating for that peat and see what was going on up there. So we have peat deposits there. We also have the clay and the sand that form the very edge of the valley of the Germany Beck. Can we see any activity, any evidence for activity going on the edge of Germany Beck there? So tantalising hints there, but maybe most important in the end is going to be the dating of that peat. When did the peat stop being laid down there? When did we start to see the development of the alluvial layers over the top of it? Because we have descriptions of peat causing problems for the soldiers in 1066. And trench number 1 has in it what are probably the remains of a road going down to the Beck. Is this the road? Is this in fact the main routeway at some point coming into York? We certainly like to think that's the case. And very interestingly, if we just go beyond trench number 1 to trench number 2, we have the area there where there's a lot of alluvium building up. So where we have our road, we have sand being deposited over the top. Only 10 metres away, downstream, we have a development of a big layer of alluvium. This is material that's being laid down by flooding, probably through the medieval period, which has at the bottom of it a layer of iron pan. Beneath that iron pan, we have a series of lenses of sands that have been laid down before the iron pan forms. And one of those layers appears to have trapped interesting material from 1066, but that was excavated last year. And we found a number of concentrations of metalwork further up Germany Beck from where the excavations took place in 2015. And the metalworking has been identified as from the right period, from the period of 1066, could be Viking or Anglo-Saxon. So we have an arrowhead. We also have an iron wedge. A very rusty horseshoe, and the metalworking has been identified as from the right period, from the period of 1066, could be Viking or Anglo-Saxon. We have an axe blank, so this hasn't ever been sharpened, it hasn't been finished, but it's the right size and the right shape to become an axe. We also have small hearth bottoms. So this is the material that forms at the bottom of a hearth where working is taking place. Also these very strange mushroom-like finds. These are little iron anvils, we think, that have actually had a spike in the bottom of them, could be driven into wood. So there's a variety of things here from the upper reaches of Germany Beck. So we've had a really, really successful time here in Fulford. Archaeologically, really interesting. Some connections to 1066, we think so. But what else have we achieved here? Well, the thing we've really achieved that really stands out for me as a community archaeologist is the community involvement here.
It's really hard work, don't get me wrong, this is the second year I've been on the dig, but it's absolutely fantastic chance to uncover a battlefield, which in my mind it definitely is the battlefield.
And it's been absolutely fantastic to have been able to take part in nearly all the aspects of the dig, and I've learnt so much, and it's been a privilege to be on the project.
And what's happening here, we hope to do the same in Stamford Bridge and discover new parts of the Stamford Bridge that's never been found before, because at the moment nothing is known about the Battle of Stamford Bridge in terms of finds. So from here I can take this knowledge back and know what I'm looking for.
So I've learnt about tools to use, trowels. Last Saturday I had a mattock, you know. So I've done that, and I've done washing finds, so I've learnt an awful lot really, and how to bag things up.
I think what I've learnt is it just takes a long time to find anything at all. And it isn't always very exciting when you do find it. It might just be a button.
It's quite nice going home at the end of the day and knowing that you've done a really good day's work.
And when you see some of the finds coming out, even if you've not been involved finding them, it just is so much of a buzz. It's amazing.
And it gives people a sense of pride to know that something major's gone in their area and they're actually a part of it now, continuing into the present day history.
Because we've had a whole set of people with us who are working as a team and have all given their time, given their skills to make this project work, and it's been a great success as a community project, and we really hope that we'll be able to do more in the future.
The archaeological finds here at Fulford have given us a unique snapshot of what happened on a medieval battlefield and what happened just after the battle was fought. But they can't continue without your support, so thank you for anything you can give.
Bye. 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 Nice to see you.